Okay, so let's move on from Asia. What do we have now? Okay, let's go to Syria then.
Okay,
sir, I'm sorry, tell me your name.
Oh, I'm Caleb with RT.
Kyle. Oh, right, Caleb.
So, this recent statement from the White House alleging that the Syrian government was planning an upcoming chemical attack. Are you concerned that that could have created an opening for terrorist groups to carry out a chemical attack?
No.
You're not concerned, even though al-Nusra, al-Qaeda groups have been using chemical weapons in Syria? That's documented?
No. Next question on Syria.
Well, I mean, they could carry out a chemical attack, and then with the White House saying, oh, Assad was going to do it, that would create a cover for them to do such a thing.
Do I have to do this again? We know that Assad has used chemical weapons on his own people, and he's done that repeatedly.
Well, hasn't the United States convinced the world that
including women and children, and we have all seen that. We have all seen the video, and there is no debate about that. Okay.
So
I'm going to.
Didn't Assad give up his chemical weapons in 2013?
No.
Didn't that happen?
No.
That didn't happen. So the
let's go over to you. Anything else on Syria?
Yeah. Said before, are you saying that al-Qaeda has not used chemical weapons?
I'm not going to get into this conversation with you about this because no. You want to have a debate, okay, about a hypothetical. Okay, and I'm not going to get into a debate.
That there's a pending chemical
I'm
attack,
not going to get into a debate about a hypothetical.
But if you announce that, then they could carry out an attack, and it would look like the government did it. I mean, isn't that a real possibility?
If you want to try to make excuses for the Assad regime, go right ahead.
Talking about
You've
Assad.
got a lot of cameras on you right now.
I'm talking about al-Qaeda.
Okay, and I'm not going to spend all our folks' time having that conversation. We all know here in this room that Bashar al-Assad is responsible for chemical attacks on his own people, including women and children. We are not going to debate it beyond that. Al-Qaeda, horrible too, but what we're talking about right now is Assad and Syria.
Well, I asked you about al-Qaeda.
Next
That's
question.
what I was asking for clarification.
Something else on Syria? Russia? Okay, let's go to Russia. Russia, Syria? How are you?
Do you guys have any evidence to share with us about this potential preparation for the use of chemical weapons? Because that wasn't actually laid out.
Right, and nor would that be laid out because that would be considered an intelligence matter. So as you all are aware, there are a lot of these things that will pop up sometimes that we just can't get into the details about this. But this has obviously gotten the attention of the United States government at the highest level.
So could the activity have perhaps been for some other reason than a chemical weapons attack preparation?
Such as?
Something that they do at the base, or, I mean, is that a possibility?
I would say that that's a hypothetical question. We know from past experience that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons on its own people. So that obviously remains a very large concern for us in the future.
I just want to make a point of clarification.
Yeah.
When you guys believe that it's in your interests, you do put out what you say is evidence or proof of things that involve intelligence. And it happened from this podium not that long ago with the crematorium that you guys said was being built at the prison.
Yeah.
So it's not a blanket, we never discuss intelligence, right?
Matt Lee, I'm not going to get into that one with you, but this is a very serious and grave matter, and when you have the president involved and his national security team and the secretary involved as well, I'd say that's a serious issue. Okay. Anything else on this? Hi. How are you?
Go ahead. Let him go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The preparation. Is it like 24-hour preparation, maybe 48 hours, and then they stand back?
I don't have the answer to that question. The White House may be able to give you more on that, or perhaps the Department of Defense or another agency, but or department rather. But I just can't get into that, and I don't have the answer to that question.
Just to clarify, Mr. Assad was also seen photographed with the top Russian general in Syria within the last 24 hours or so. Do you know if the Russians, or are we aware if the Russians were aware about these preparations as well?
I'm not aware of that.
We don't have any intel saying one way or another.
I just can't get into any intelligence, but I'm not personally aware of that. Anything else on Russia, Syria? Hold on. Russia, Syria? Okay, who's got it? Sir in the back.
Yeah, so Ambassador Haley said today that they would blame Iran, Russia, and Syria if chemical weapons were, again, what does it mean to blame these countries? How would the U.S. hold them accountable in the event of another strike?
Okay.
Does the U.S. intend on militarily striking Iran or Russia in the event of a chemical weapons attack?
Okay, your third question I can't answer. That's a Department of Defense matter, and then that's also a hypothetical. In terms of the first question, which is why would we look to Syria and Iran?
What does it mean? What does it mean to blame them?
Well, we've seen, all we have to do is look to the past, right? And we have seen as the Syrian regime back in 2015 was on the verge of collapsing. Who came in to help save the Syrian regime? Who came in? Russia came in. And that is exactly why we are today, we meaning the world, in the place that Syria is. Russia came in, helped bolster up Syrian forces, and we have seen the death, the devastation, the destruction that has taken place ever since. So when we say Russia would be held responsible, we believe that they play a role in this as well. They have a lot of influence with the Assad regime, and we have consistently called upon them to use their influence with the Assad regime to stop this kind of activity. John Hein.
Her remarks said any attacks on the Syrian people, will be blamed, on the Assad and the Russians.
Okay.
Why not wait to find out? This is obviously a complex war with a
Right.
number of actors,
Yeah, you're right.
including ISIS. It seemed like a rather unnuanced comment. Wouldn't you find out who exactly, was responsible before blaming?
I can't get too much into what Ambassador Haley said on the Hill today. I don't have all of her comments in front of me, so I just have to refer you to the US-UN for additional clarification on
Well,
what she
she
meant.
actually said that last night in
Okay.
a tweet,
Okay.
as well as saying it again on the
Okay.
Hill. Are you?
Yeah.
The State Department in the United States government would look to find out and make sure it had evidence of who was exactly responsible, right, before issuing a blanket blame for attacks on the Syrian people.
I think
right?
her comments stand for themselves.
Please.
Syria. The Russian Ministry of Defense says that in Aleppo there was recently a chemical weapons attack and that it was conducted by the Nour Al-Zinki organization, which is an opposition group that has received support from the United States. Is the United States still supporting this organization?
So unaware of that allegation. The only thing I'm aware of is the alleged chemical weapons attack on the town of Syria. I think we're talking about separate incidents. If I'm correct, I don't know.
I'm referring to something in Aleppo.
You're talking about something in Aleppo. So haven't seen those reports. Obviously, as we said with the incident that took place, I think 2 days ago, allegedly, there were reports of chemical weapons being used in another town. But the same would hold true with this. Is obviously we condemn strongly the use of any chemical weapons, and any credible allegations of their use in Syria will investigate. And I believe it's the purview of the OPCW that would carry out such an investigation. As to your follow-on question about this group, I don't have in front of me that we actually fund them. I mean, you're saying we provide them with assistance?
Yes, as part of the so-called moderate opposition.
Yeah. I don't know what.
Now, the group
again,
also.
I haven't seen the allegations yet, so I think it's too early for me to A, make that assessment, and B, make that connection.
It's been said that the State Department is also investigating allegations. I mean, there's a video of this group beheading a 10-year-old Palestinian
Yes.
boy.
Yeah, I'm aware of
how are
that.
those investigations going? Has there been any result?
Yeah, so we did talk about that. We were looking into that incident. Obviously, we condemned if it were true. I know that the group itself said that they had also made some arrests and then set up a commission of inquiry into the incident. I don't have any updates at this point in time, but I can certainly check and get back to you.
So what does a rebel group in Syria have to do to not receive U.S. funds any longer? What is the line that they must cross? What kind of controversial incident must take place for a group to stop receiving U.S. funds?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of vetting of the Syrian moderate opposition that has already taken place. And it's not just by the U.S., but it's by all the members of the ISSG and, frankly, the UN. And it was established that al-Nusra, as well as Daesh or ISIL, were considered to be, by all members and by the UN, to be terrorist organizations. I think, again, these are not easy processes, and one incident here and there would not necessarily make you a terrorist group. Now, let me be very clear that we don't condone any of the activities that you just cited. Possible use of chemical weapons, possible beheading of a young child, any human rights abuses, any of those things would give us serious cause for concern. That said, where we are in the broader geopolitical or political situation in Syria is, and one of the ongoing discussions that we've been having with Russia, is how do we clearly delineate between these known terrorist groups, Nusra and Daesh, and the moderate opposition? And how do we have a clear understanding of who is where so that we can, longer game here, get back in place a cessation of hostilities that is credible, that can also then jumpstart the political process.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that even if these allegations are true, there's still a chance that the United States would continue supporting these groups. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not making any, I'm not frankly answering any hypotheticals. We just don't know at this point. As I said, we would regard any of the acts that you mentioned or cited, and again, they are just allegations at this point. We take them very seriously and look into them and investigate them.
They're not a red line.
Again,
and U.S. support.
So for a terrorist organization, there are fundamental actions, one of which is an intention to carry out terrorist attacks, both within Syria, but as well as on the West. You know, some of these groups, as I said, Nusra and al-Qaeda, al-Qaeda is al-Nusra, they're one and the same, and Daesh have expressed and indeed acted on these intentions. But as to the other members of the moderate Syrian opposition, look, we're constantly evaluating their behavior, and frankly, for them to be a member of the moderate Syrian opposition and to be part of the cessation of hostilities and the Syrian democratic forces, it requires that they meet the standards. And those standards are respect for human rights and adherence to a cessation of hostilities.
And does that include not using chemical weapons? Is that part of the standard?
Of course.
So you're still looking into the chemical weapons charges?
Yes. Yeah, I don't have any updates on that. Yeah.
Just to be clear, if a group was using chemical weapons, their funding would be cut off.
Again, I will not make any statements of one or the other until we know all the facts and have determined who is to blame for any. I mean, honestly, it's the first time I'm hearing about a report for use of chemical weapons. But again, we have also seen reports of the use of chemical weapons on another town, and we're looking into that. So, I mean, again, we just don't have
a policy not to support groups that use chemical weapons?
We condemn the use of chemical weapons.
Yes, but do you have a policy of not supporting groups that do such things?
Again, we would evaluate any support for any groups that are engaged in any kind of activity that, frankly, go against international norms.
The other thing you said was that possible beheading. Are you not convinced that the video is,
no, I'm
accurate?
I'm just not aware that we've determined
who exactly was behind it?
Who is actually behind it. Thank you.
تذبحوا هذه الفرد عمل شوف ايش امنيته لا اخوه بده هيك دبيك ايش امنيتك ايش امنيتك ذبح نحن اسمع الدواعش يوال جينا عظم يوال شو ذبح يا ابن الكلب علي صام علي علي هي من جوا جوا بالمطبخ. منين هو؟ منين هو؟
Matt, and then I'm going to go to Nick.
Just very briefly on Aleppo,
course.
and this group that is allegedly was involved in breaking the siege, the rebel group, the ones that were accused of beheading
al-Zinki.
beheading this child. One, do you know if the reports are true that they are or were involved in the fighting around Aleppo recently?
So we've seen reports that the alleged perpetrators in last month's video have been seen fighting in Aleppo. I'm not in a position to confirm.
Okay. Should it become confirmed that they are, is that an issue for you guys?
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, when reports of the beheading came out, we strongly condemned, you know, the barbaric actions seen on that video. No matter what group was responsible. We note that that group had also said that they would hold those individuals to account. We're not in a position to confirm if that's happened, but we do expect all parties to comply with obligations under the law of armed conflict.
So you're unaware that there has ever been a resolution to this specific
I am not in a position to confirm that, no.
Case. And then just the other thing, which I think you probably won't answer, but is this group still being supported by, or was it ever supported by the United States?
So for security reasons, we do not comment on which groups are funded by the United States. However, we don't support groups that commit this sort of barbarity, period.
Okay. So that would imply, without saying it directly, that if a group were to have done something like this and it had been getting U.S. support, it would no longer be eligible for U.S. support.
I just repeat my last point. We do not support groups.
Is it against the rules to complete a syllogism in this building?
It is, for security reasons, we don't indicate which groups we do support. It's policy.
I'm asking you if you don't support them, not if you do.
What I'm saying is that we don't support groups that would engage in this sort of barbarity.
That would engage.
That may have engaged. Okay.
This was gone over at great length in the White House briefings. Yeah. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm not, at least. But on Syria and on Russia and on this proposal that's being brought, it's been clear for several years now, or at least more than 18 months, that the U.S. position has slowly but steadily evolved, shifted, coming more in line with the Russian position, which has remained consistent since the very beginning of this conflict. And I'm just wondering why, if the kind of proposal that's being presented, or that has been presented, is being presented now, why couldn't it have been presented far earlier in this process, at least after December, when the Secretary went to Moscow and essentially aligned the U.S. position with that of the Russians vis-a-vis Assad? Is it wrong to think that had this proposal been made earlier, a lot of lives could have been saved?
I would dispute the view that our position has moved. Our position has been consistent, which is Assad must go, that there must be space to have discussions to create that area for a political transition to move. I'm not going to comment on the details of documents, as the White House said, that haven't been approved or agreed to. We have long said that we would welcome, Russia's increased focus on ISIL, on al-Qaeda in Syria. Our common view is that these groups pose a threat to not only the people of Syria, but to both our nations. On your question on timing, again, I'm not going to get ahead of discussions that may be happening in Moscow. Hopefully we'll have more later today.
Well, you say that your position has been consistent, but it hasn't. First it was Assad must go, and he must go immediately. Then it was, well, maybe he can hang on for a little bit, but in the end he still has to go. But that it's got to be up to the Syrian people to...
Well, it's always got to be up to the Syrian people.
Yeah,
that
but your
hasn't
position
changed.
on Assad definitely did change in terms of the timing of when he has to go. And now it appears to have changed to the point where you are prepared to accept or agree to joint operations with the Russians, something that they proposed well over a month or two ago. So it may not on that score, it may not have changed just yet because it hasn't been agreed to, but you are now open to things that you weren't open to just several months ago on the military front. And I guess I don't understand why it's wrong for people who are critics of the policy, whatever it is, to point out that if you really think that this is going to salvage the ceasefire and lead to transition talks, or I think it has a chance to, why didn't you do it earlier? I mean, thousands of people have died in the interim.
We are absolutely aware of that. We have been consistent in calling not only for the cessation of hostilities to continue in Syria, but also to push Russia to exert its influence on the Syrian regime to make that possible. I'm going to unpack your statement, your questions a little bit. First on the cooperation. At present, we are not conducting or coordinating military operations with Russia. It's not clear we'll reach an agreement to do that. In Moscow, the Secretary will discuss the importance of focusing Russian efforts on ISIL and al-Qaeda, while emphasizing the urgent need for Russia and the Syrian regime to meet their commitments. That hasn't changed. We have been consistent all along on that. And we've also said that we're not going to commit indefinitely to diplomacy that doesn't achieve real results. We cannot provide political cover for those seeking to pursue a different agenda. Russia has influence. It has shown it has influence. The Secretary is committed to creating the space for a political transition. Our position on Assad has not changed.
The point is that whether or not you say it's not clear we will reach an agreement to conduct or coordinate joint military operations. But the mere fact that you're considering doing it is a shift.
Yeah, I would dispute that.
What?
I would say
how can you possibly
that
dispute that? It has been the position of the administration that you would not, or that you would deconflict as soon as the Russians sent their planes and people in back in last September. The position up until now has been nothing other than just this deconfliction exercise. Now you are considering, have proposed, or willing to consider Russian proposal But that is in itself is a shift. It is not consistent
Our
with your
focus-
position. All right, you're obviously we're not going to get into it. I have just one more, and then it's brief, and that is that your colleague at the White House and you also said that it's time the Russians have to make a choice.
Yeah.
That they have to. This is a test. The testing has been going on and on and on and on and on. It seems clear to everybody, that, except for you guys apparently, or at least it seems clear to most people, that the Russians have made their choice, and that it is kind of pointless to keep testing them when it's clear that they're not going to budge.
But we've seen repeatedly through the nature of this conflict that Russia does have influence. We saw when the beginning of the cessation of hostilities that they do have the ability to influence the regime. That is our goal here. Our points, our position have been the same all along on this matter.
Okay, then this is Syria related, but it also has to do with Yemen. Over the weekend, there was this airstrike on a funeral by the Saudi-led coalition, and I'm just wondering, does the administration see any difference between this kind of thing and what you accuse the Russians and the Syrians and the Iranians of doing in Syria, particularly Aleppo?
Well, yeah, I think there are.
Other than
Some
support the
differences.
Saudi coalition and don't support the Syrians and Russians? What are the other differences?
Well, look, there's a couple of things, Matt. The strike over the weekend is being investigated, and the Saudis publicly said that they were going to investigate this as for the potential of it being, in fact, wrongly implemented and wrongly executed. I haven't seen a single case in Syria where the regime or the Russian military, after bombing civilian targets deliberately and indiscriminately, said, "Yeah, we're going to look into that. We're not sure that that we did that right. We're going to take a look at it." Not once, not once. But the Saudis are, and they're willing to admit that this could have been a mistake, and that they're going to investigate that, and they've done that in the past. So it is different. I think it's also important to remember that in the Saudis' case, their cities, their citizens are under very real, darn near daily threat from missiles being launched on the Yemeni side of their border. Missiles that are provided by Iran to the Houthi rebels. So there is this the pressing requirement for self-defense to them right across the border that certainly has driven much of their military activity in Yemen in the past. Now, I do want to say, and you saw our statement over the weekend, we take this very seriously, and we have been nothing but candid and forthright with the Saudis about our concerns over civilian casualties and collateral damage, and our concerns about lack of precision in the conduct of some of these strikes. So I don't want to wave it off and say that the United States isn't taking this very, very seriously, what happened in Yemen. As you saw from the statement that the NSC issued, that we're going to review the aid and assistance that you pointed to in your question that go to Saudi Arabia, particularly, well, we always do in every case. We constantly review that aid and assistance, but in particular light of this strike over the weekend. So, yeah, there's some key differences.
So you don't think that, despite the fact that no investigation has been completed yet, you're sure that this was not deliberate?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, but you said that the Russian and Syrian attacks are deliberate.
They are.
Okay.
They are.
But
What I'm saying is
maybe I'm wrong on this, but do you not regard the Russian call for an investigation into the attack on the aid convoy as a real thing?
well, they can point to how real it is. I've also seen they flip-flopped, right? First they said they wanted an investigation, then they pulled it back. So it's not exactly been a clarion call for an investigation. And what we're seeing in Aleppo is nothing but a concerted effort over recent days to take that city by force, to subdue it by force. This isn't indiscriminate, haphazard, accidental bombing of infrastructure. It's very deliberate.
All right. I think this is probably my last one on this, but you pointed to the fact that the Saudis are doing this self-defense. Is that not this one specific thing, but in its entirety?
They were invited in by the Yemeni government. The Saudi-led coalition was invited in by the Yemeni government. Now I know what you're going to say. Well, Russians were invited by Syria, by Assad to do. I get this. I'm not trying to make too much of a historical analogy.
I wasn't going to.
But they were invited in by the Yemeni government, and they are under real threat on their side, on the Yemeni side of their border.
That wasn't where I was going with this, but you said that they're under threat. The Saudis are under threat from missiles provided by Iran, and yet at the same time, you must understand that Yemeni civilians are increasingly at risk and being killed by weapons that the United States has furnished to the Saudis and their coalition partners in this. So you don't find that there's any kind of an issue with this? Because a lot of people do, including on the Hill. So just because these missiles were made in Iran, I mean, people on the ground in Yemen are looking at what's raining down on them from the sky, and it says "Made in USA" on it. Is that not a problem?
Of course it's a problem, and that's why in our statement over the weekend, issued by the National Security Council, that we're going to undertake a review of that aid and assistance. Of course it's a problem, and I'm not saying that. Look, it is a fact that they are under threat from the Yemen side of the border with missiles from Iran. That is just a fact. I'm not saying that
well, it's also
justifies,
a fact that civilians are being killed.
And I'm not saying that fact justifies civilian casualties. I'm simply trying to put your answer into some context here. But obviously, we're very concerned about what happened over the weekend. We wouldn't have issued that very strong statement if we didn't.
Do you know if there's been